Hi, I'm Helen Cumins, and this is Mallorca Living, a video podcast dedicated to sharing the stories of inspiring people who have made this beautiful island their home. For each episode, we'll share their story. They'll tell us about their journey, the challenges, the triumphs, the insider tips that make life here so special. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to Mallorca Living. I'm here today with Julie May, and we're going to hear all about Julie's move from Canada to Mallorca. You're very welcome, Julie. Will you introduce us, please, this is companion?
My new dog, Hazel.
Hazel. And where does the name Hazel come from?
The Sound of Music. The innocent young teenage gal.
Yeah. And how innocent is she so far?
She's actually pretty good.
She is so cute.
Yeah. She's a big difference from my large dog beforehand. She's the complete opposite, but she's turning out great. I always thought small dogs weren't intelligent, but she's smart as a whip.
She's smart as a whip. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. So Julie, thank you very much for being here. And what I would love to share today with our listeners is your journey from Canada to Mallorca. So you have shared some of the insights with me already, and it would just be lovely to kind of take us back to, I think it was 2020.
It was, yeah.
When life changed for you, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that year life changed for everybody.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Which definitely played a role for me. Because I could tell that change needed to happen for me. Where I was loving where I was living, I was in the wine region of British Columbia, which is a stunning area.
That where you were originally from?
No, I'm originally from Vancouver, just 5 hours west by car. And I moved to the wine region 8 years previously because I was with a mate that didn't want to live in a city. And we were looking where we would live, and the wine region is stunning. In fact, New York Times wrote it up as the new Napa Valley. Oh, wow. So it was beautiful, and we both agreed on that area, and we made a life there. I was painting and renovating a home, swinging the hammer, not hiring trades, but I was actually doing the work.
But your background is in interior design.
Yeah. So I was able to do up all the plans and see what I wanted to do with the house. So that was a big part of our time there. It took a couple of years. At any rate, during 2020, when COVID, sort of the tail end of that happened, I just felt that I needed to shift. My community was pretty much shut down, and I didn't feel that community worked for me anymore. I had also split from my partner, and it was time for a move. And I've lived in other areas, Germany. In my 20s, I did something similar. I just sort of got up one day and said, it's time for a change. And I picked a point on the map, which happened to be Munich, and went there and lived and worked.
To clarify, your parents both
are German, yes.
Are German. And they had emigrated to Canada, right?
Correct, yeah.
So that also sort of, just to say, it helped you with your move here to Europe because of having a German passport,
absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Right. And my parents immigrated in the 50s to Canada, which was a large influx of Europeans at that time. Later on, in the 90s, it became a large influx of Asians. Right. Because Hong Kong was, I don't remember the year, Hong Kong was going back to the Brits, and a lot of them came to Vancouver. I mention this because I see parallels with the foreigners here in Mallorca, right. And I've sort of drawn on that a few times in my thoughts. At any rate, so I decided to leave, and I was looking to see where I would go in the world.
Can I just say to you, when you say that, like you wake up one day and you decide that chapter is done, let's say,
correct.
And now I need to open a new chapter.
Correct.
Well, two things strike me. One is the clarity, because as women, we kind of do fill ourselves sometimes with self-doubt. We make a decision, then we go back. And I think the other thing is the courage and the bravery to say, I'm ready, I'm open. What are your thoughts on?
Well, as far as the courage goes, I agree. I think to move through life without courage is tragic. And I feel I came in that way, so I don't take any credit for that. In fact, when I was 4 years old, I was on the roof having a ball while all the neighbors were with their arms out below. So I think I've always just kind of, there's a German expression, Augen zu und Gas, which means eyes closed and step on the gas. So
I love that. Eyes closed,
yeah, just go for it. In other
gas.
words, so I've always been a little bit like that. The other thing, as far as you know, believing in yourself, I think if the head gets too involved, you get into trouble.
Yeah.
I've noticed that in my life. And if one has the courage, it's really the courage to follow your heart. And due to some tragedy in my earlier years within the family, I vowed to myself that I would have the courage always to follow my heart. And that was a commitment that has served me very, very well.
Because you're quite a spiritual person. I think it's one of the things that we've even bonded somehow on a deeper level, no? Of our the same view.
So.
We share kind of a similar view of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say about that. Spiritual is, you know, something different for everybody.
Yeah, but it's like this trust you have in life, and trust in your instinct, and trust in your heart, right? I think that's really what spirituality is when you pare it back. Yeah.
And then I think once you have that trust, I find the universe always tests you.
Yes.
Just to see how committed you actually are.
That's right. Well, we get to that subject in a minute, because I know you've been tested quite a bit since you've been here. So just going back to finish the story of your transition here from Canada, you woke up, you've decided to move. What was the next step?
The next step was sort of, well, I wouldn't say I woke up and decided to move. It was sort of a slow progression over, let's say, a month. And in that month's time, I just started dreaming. I do that a lot. When I feel that there's time for a shift, I just dream and try on different dreams. I put myself in different situations and just try them on and see how they feel. And so I tried on the dream of Mallorca, as well as other places. I'm an artist, and so I was looking at San Miguel Allende in Mexico, which is also, I've heard from friends, it's a fabulous community. And I also was looking at Savannah, Georgia, upstate New York, and Germany, although Germany, I couldn't land on anywhere specific that that sort of struck out. So at that point, sort of Mallorca was the biggest draw.
Had you been already to Mallorca?
I had been very briefly with a partner at the time. We did a 10-week trip house swapping.
Oh, yes.
Because I lived in Hawaii. I house swapped Hawaii for all of the sort of the coast of Spain to explore, and then just quickly popped over to Mallorca. My ex-husband was living here. And I was here for 3 days. It was just a whirlwind tour, and it was nothing. I had nothing in mind about it. It was just part of the tour of Spain.
So Mallorca, from 3 days been here, it was on your radar.
It was. It was. I mean, again, I had my ex-husband here, who's kind of comes and goes, and we have a great relationship. So it was on my radar. And then, so when it came time to make the decision, there was sort of factors in that decision. And some of those factors was whether I would be able to get away without knowing the language right away. And that is possible here. The weather. Why move somewhere cold where you can be somewhere balmy? I'd been living in Hawaii and California, so I was getting used to my blood is getting thinner. Obviously politically, San Miguel Allende I ruled out because the cartels, and I just wasn't interested. So it had to have some sort of stability.
And safety.
Exactly, safety and stability. Beauty is probably the number one. I say that, down on the list, but I would say it's more like number one for me. I'm again, being an artist, it just fills my soul. I need beauty around me. So those were some of the reasons I chose Mallorca. Yeah.
And one of the factors with Europe also was that your children are. Well, you have one daughter.
Yes. One of the other reasons was one of my daughter, who is recently having had grandbabies. So she's in England, and that's a much shorter flight. It's an hour and a half for me instead of 9 hours.
Yeah.
So that also played a role. Yeah, for
You
sure.
love coming to Europe.
Yeah.
And
I mean, look, it's hard for me to say which sort of the value of each role, but the bill was fit the more that I tried that dream on.
Yeah. So tell us, I think from when you decided to, when you moved.
6 weeks.
It's crazy.
6 weeks.
During the pandemic.
There was a thing that I'm personally not vaccinated. I respect everyone and their choices. And the government had said at the time, if you're not vaccinated, you won't be able to leave the country. This was at the tail end of the pandemic. So whenever everyone else was opening up, they were sort of clamping down. And they sort of said that we didn't know how long that you wouldn't be able to leave. And I just thought the world's a really big place. So you had 6 weeks.
It sounded like it was very harsh in Canada.
For me, it was.
It caused a lot of conflict within
it certainly
families,
has with me.
Friendships.
Yeah,
everything.
It has with me. I'm still bearing the results of that. So hopefully. So 6 weeks, and I had a lot to get done. But I knew it was right because any one of those administrative tasks normally would have taken months. And I counted, I had 7 or 10, depending on how you count, between tax filings in 2 countries, both personally and professionally, selling properties, arranging containers, getting my dog shipped over, a custom crate had to be made, and separate flights, to obviously selling the property, getting my German passport in order. There was just a big list, and it all happened really well. And then to get out of my area, Vancouver was closed off at the time. There was massive flooding that year, and every highway to Vancouver was closed. I think it's the first time in history. So I actually had to take a helicopter.
Really?
I put my dog and me in a helicopter. I said, look, there must be other people. So luckily the company got a lot of people on board, so the cost wasn't prohibitive. But yeah, I had to helicopter out of there because no airline would take the dog. I couldn't fly out. So it was,
oh my God.
And again, it was one of those things where if it's meant to be, it'll happen. And it did.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
wow.
It's kind of an Indiana Jones story.
Right. So here you are, and then you land in Mallorca, you and Heidi.
Yeah, I land, and I just booked one. I thought I'm going to treat myself to a nice hotel, and booked a nice hotel in Old Town Palma. And then I had looked for an Airbnb before I'd left. And my criteria was I just want something beautiful. And I recalled, my memory's actually, short-term memory's not very good, but I did remember an orange tram. And I thought, where was that little town that my ex sort of took me to very briefly with the orange tram? And I went online and I found it, and of course it's Sóller. And so I had found a Airbnb in that area, and it was only like 2 weeks after that I realized, oh yeah, okay, this is, I came down to Sóller and I said, okay, I've got it right. This is the memory, it was all a bit blurry. Anyway, so I never left Fornalutx. It had everything I needed.
So just to explain that, literally you have the bay, I suppose, of Sóller. So you have Sóller town, which is a beautiful town.
Yes.
You have the port of Sóller.
Yes.
And then just up at the back
up the valley.
Up at the valley, you have Fornalutx behind Bureaucracy, which is such a beautiful place too. So literally Fornalutx is kind of tucked in, isn't it? Behind, sort of before it's on a hill, but it's also big mountains behind.
Yeah.
So you chose to move to settle, let's say.
I got the Airbnb, and again, I just sort of, surrendered to, this is sort of the spiritual side of things. I just decided to surrender and to be open to what comes. And I heard that rentals were very difficult to get, and I was offered by my Airbnb host to rent her property until, again, I told her I was moving to Mallorca. So she said, well, why don't you rent my property until you sort of find what you want? Well, that's kind of unheard of. I mean, that it was offered, because they're so hard to find. And so I went with that. And then I realized I didn't want to leave. I mean, I had the mountains, I had the sea 10 minutes away. I had a small village, which was important to me. in wine region in Canada, I also was in a small village, and I liked the smaller village life where people look at each other in the eye and say hello. And so it was time to sort of say, I think I found my spot. And ever since I kind of, which is something I often do, I've done in the past, I kind of keep my eye out and say, oh, would I have preferred this? Or would this, or did I jump the gun? And I still haven't found anything I'd prefer more.
Yeah, but Fornalutx is such a special place.
It
is absolutely gorgeous. And what I like about it is that because it's a little bit tucked away, you don't have the same influx of tourists in the summer. I mean, of course, it's a very visited place. In actual fact, I think it's one most beautiful village in Spain a number of times because it's so beautiful. But it's kind of less known than Sóller, for example, which literally in summer, if you lift your foot off the pavement, somebody else puts their foot down. It's almost too much, right?
Yeah, but the word is getting out.
Yes.
The word is getting out,
yes.
So
tell me about, we'll get to the part where you bought your properties and stuff, but just tell me, what is life like in Fornalutx?
Super quiet. I mean, I think what attracted me to the valley, I was recovering. I felt like I spent the first year healing, as you said, walking the hills with my dog. And so there was a great appeal in the peace and tranquility in that valley. And I really felt energetically that in that valley. All the tiered stone walls, I could just imagine the people building them over the eons, and the, bleating of the sheep and the donkeys, and it just really appealed to me. So life.
And the village itself is so pretty.
It is.
It revolves around this little plaza.
Yes, and at the time I was living up the hill, so I'd have to walk 20 minutes down into the village.
Okay, so you were kind of out in the countryside.
I was right up there in one of those olivars.
Okay.
Yeah, and looking down on the village. It was stunning. And so village life is super simple, which I like. It's, the Mallorcans have their traditions, always lots of festivals and a slower way of life. And you kind of go with the flow. I ended up, again, great flow for me. A space came up for my studio, and so I grabbed that opportunity. So,
but it's the most beautiful space because the steps now go.
Well, the location. The space could be, Like,
yeah, but it's cute and it's very nice, and you work there, and it's like a working studio. So it's a gallery exhibiting your work, but it's also, and it's such a. I mean, it must feel very good to work there.
Oh, amazing! After years of being tucked away, it's just really nice to hear. Again, village life, the buzz of the plaza, a coffee, a baby crying, chinkings of wine glasses. The plaza in our village is like the living room.
Yeah,
of
it's
the
like
village.
a heartbeat of the village.
Yeah, and so I love that.
How about the locals? Have they taken you in?
I have a really nice rapport with the locals. I didn't necessarily try to do that. I think being respectful and honest and curious is kind of that kind of thing happens naturally. But it probably helped that I threw an amazing party the first few months I was there and invited everybody.
Good.
But again, it was my 60th birthday, and I just thought I thought I'm going to invite everyone that makes a difference to my day as I walk through the village.
That's beautiful.
So that was the postman, that was the barista, that was anyone that made a difference to my day. And it was the first sort of party after COVID, and everyone was thrilled to have the villagers and the foreigners together. It was created a bit of a wave.
What a lovely idea. Yeah, you're a very thoughtful person, actually.
Well, it was just, I feel
yeah,
it was
you
luck.
are.
I felt it was luck.
So tell me a little bit more about your decision then to let's say buy a home. So you've rented to give it a try. You're feeling very settled. People are open and welcoming.
Yeah.
And you're feeling life. This could be my future life here.
Yeah.
And then what about the journey to buy a property?
That was pretty similar to how all the other operations went. I personally wasn't trusting in the banks at the time. I felt everything was really volatile. I wanted my money out of the bank. So it was important to me just to get into real estate as quickly as possible. So I bought 2 properties. I bought one first and lived in that. And then I bought another one, and I've moved, and I now rent out.
So the first one is in the village.
In the village, on the stairs, walk in only. It's 800-year-old house. It's just super cool to live in a village like that, and I enjoyed that. But at the time, I had a really big dog, like just small, slightly smaller than a Great Dane, and so I needed some some land. So I just a 5-minute walk, literally outside the village, which has amazing how 5 minutes makes a difference, but it does. And I'm rural. I'm considered rural, so that's where I am now. And so as far as getting that, to be honest with you, I was really frustrated when I got here. No, in Canada, you can hire a real estate agent, and they're your buyer's agent, and it has as much clout as a selling agent. And here, that is not the case.
Well, it's changing. We have started to offer this service, but unfortunately, we didn't know each other at that moment.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm always very grateful to you, because you always tell everyone you meet, I wish I'd had somebody like Helen when I moved to Mallorca.
It's super true. But I think personally, I would have made some slightly different decisions, to be honest with you. I think I would have, I would have made, I don't need to get into the details of what that would be, but there would be something I would do slightly different.
And was that just because you would have known, you would have made a kind of a more informed decision?
A more informed decision, a perspective from someone that knows the island. For instance, I bought this property for the investment and the return I'm getting on my rent. I could have done better, like with an apartment in Palma, for instance.
Yeah. And it would have given you a second option, let's say.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just, and it's all okay, and I'll stick with my, with my decisions. But that would have been something I would have done slightly differently.
And I think one thing that we've also taught, I mean, you've been, as an interior designer, and a lot of creativity, you've been very, very restricted in terms of what you could do with your other property.
Exactly. So,
and if I mean, not to criticize, but it's kind of, if you make a decision, it's really good to know in advance what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, and then you can go ahead, make your decision if it fits within that criteria.
Correct. Yeah. I've sort of, I don't even know how many homes I've done, but I've done a lot of homes where I bought them and made them fabulous, lived in them. It was all it wasn't to flip or anything. It was just part of my life and lifestyle. And I've found here to do that has been really difficult. Mainly, I don't know if it's everywhere on the island. I'm on a World UNESCO site, and so I respect that. I don't have a problem with it per se. It's just the one thing in my particular house that was lacking was the connection between the indoor and the outdoor. And had I known that I wouldn't be able to do some things, I might not have bought the place.
Yeah. And just to clarify that, because you live in the Sierra de Tramontana, of course, it's a very, very, very highly protected area. And it has, in Mallorca, there's different levels of protection. And your area there is probably one of the highest. Because even just changing now the how do you say, the driveway material, you have been unable to do it, or making a window bigger, or small things, which would have seemed like kind of very basic, very basic.
Well, by my standards, it was so basic. I used to take houses down to the foundation and the chimney.
Yes, and then so it's something to bear in mind, that if you are drawn to this more traditional villages like Sóller, Fornalutx, all these villages that are really in the Tramontana, the Valdemosa, they are really highly protected, and a lot of restrictions in terms of what materials you can use, what you can do. So it's
a lot of bureaucracy.
A lot of bureaucracy.
And then finding trades, So as an experienced designer, I'm sort of completely shied away from it, just because I just don't have it in me. I know what's involved in doing it. So again, I would recommend any buyers to get the house you want and like right away, like as is.
Yeah, I mean, there's very good construction companies here, and there's good project managers. But for that, nowadays especially, you need a big budget, really, because the prices for per meter for renovating or constructing, it's actually super high because we're on an island and because we have limited resources and limited workforce and so on. It seems like the demand exceeds by a great deal.
And then also areas, I think area specific. I think
Yeah.
finding something more towards Palma, this end of the island, is easier than in the mountains.
Yeah.
And then there's also, I've noticed, there's a little bit of a political edge to it. You know, in my village, for instance, they would want me to hire village people.
And can you do that? Is there language barrier there? Are they available? Can you do that?
Yeah, there's one contractor who I think is really great, but again, I you know, he was out of my price point, but he does excellent work, and the waiting list right now is 2 years.
Oh my gosh! Wow. So if you want to hire this construction company, you're talking 2 years. Wow. Yeah, that's a long time.
So there's things to think about. Having said all that, it also affords you to drop in to what is. You know, be grateful for what you have. I love where I live. I love my mountain view. I'm 5 minutes from the village. Like, do I really need, I've had these things in my life. I don't really miss them.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it's a good opportunity to go within and look at your own values.
There was a couple of other things that I know because we know each other.
Yeah.
I hear some of the stories. The whole banking thing for you, and like I know somebody recommended for you a particular bank because of the bank manager, for example, and he's been incredibly helpful to you. And then, well, let's talk about that, because I mean, these are the practical, basic things that people need. And sometimes to get a recommendation, I remember when I started my business also, somebody recommended me, my bank and my bank manager, and I'm still with the same one, because in the end, these personal relationships, or even having somebody just that you can go and talk to and ask questions and get some practical answers, can be invaluable, right?
Absolutely. I think more so than where I'm used to in Canada, where everything's done by the book and to the letter and T's. I find Spain slightly different. You know, there is a little bit of
more leeway.
Exactly. I don't know quite how to phrase that. There is more leeway. So a personal relationship I found to be really important. And it was just luck that I found my guy. Yeah, I mean, the moral of the story
because
is
things like that, when you have a question, when you have any kind of issue, you have a person that you can go and talk to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, never mind Canada or the difference between Canada and Spain, just in general, everything's online, and, you know, customer service is becoming a rare breed these days.
Yeah, no, I agree. But so I suppose my point is don't be shy to ask for referrals, and don't, ask for recommendations from friends or from anybody, because getting that intro can be just such an invaluable support in the long run.
Yes.
And then the other topic I wanted to talk to you about was your driving test experience, because I know it became such a big thing in your life.
Well, I'm just finding in general, as I age, the short-term memory is not what it used to be. And I don't know if it's the fog from, you know, COVID, or I have no idea, but I have noticed that, you know, in trying to learn the language, for instance, I have to hear a word 100 times before I remember it. Well, back in my 20s, when I lived in Germany for 3 years, I was dreaming in the language after 3 years. It's been 3 years now, and I don't even have the basics of the basics, which I'm a bit ashamed of. At any rate, so the driving, I didn't want, a lot of foreigners kind of drive and they keep their license and they just take the fine. But I really wanted to land here. I wanted to land here with taxes and real estate. I wanted to land here fully. And driver's license was part of that. And so...
because you had an international license.
No, I had a Canadian license.
And therefore, you couldn't just swap your license.
No, you can only swap it with the European Union. I don't even,
Okay.
and now they've allowed Britain to do it, but definitely not anything in North America
Okay.
or my understanding South America.
So you've got to resit your test, basically.
Yeah, you got to resit the written and the practical.
Okay.
That was hilarious.
Which I'm sure many of us would never pass.
Oh man! Well, and they don't. I mean, I don't have one friend that passed either or on the first try.
Oh
so
my
I was
gosh.
completely mentally prepared.
Could you do it in English? Was it possible?
Yeah, well, it is in English, and everyone says, "Oh, well, that'd be easy." But the problem is the translation's tricky. The other problem is I think, but this is just a personal belief, that they write it in such a way that they do want you to have some wrong answers because it's good business to come back.
Okay.
But that might be a bit presumptuous of me. So I don't feel like it is written in your favor. It's not uplifting and supportive.
Okay.
And so it's a matter of memorizing what they wanted to hear.
Okay. Okay. So you did, but you had to take a number of driving lessons. And
I spent a lot.
But a lot of time, effort.
A lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of
stress.
effort. But the good news is I got it.
But you got it on the first go round.
I got both on the first go round.
Done,
yeah, I got both on the first go round. So it was worth it. But
what a commitment, though. I thought that was amazing that you put in the effort to do that.
Well,
I really admire you.
Technically I had to. I mean, I couldn't go back to Canada and renew. I wasn't a resident of Canada anymore. So technically you have to.
Yeah. So you bit the bullet and off you go.
I just played by the book.
Okay, so the next thing I want to talk to you about is business, because I mean, it's normal known that there's a lot of artists worldwide that dream to live in a place like Mallorca, because it is, a lot of artists say it's something to do with the light here, that they're, it's very uplifting, would you agree?
I think the light is beautiful here, yeah. Here, and there's some other places in the world that it reminds me of. In the high mesas of New Mexico have similar light. Yeah, the light is special here.
Yeah. So,
having said that, as an artist, I mean, I don't. You personally, with the type of work I do, I'm not utilizing that light. I would have with my old work, where you're.
But it is
outdoor.
Something that attracts us all, I think, just
absolutely.
to the island because of the special light here. But just tell me a little bit about, first, before we talk about the business side, about the type of art that you do. And I have one of your beautiful paintings here.
So yeah, I did representational art for 20 years, which means painting something to look like something so that you can recognize what it is that you're looking at. And I did that mainly to prove that I could paint. I'm self-taught, so I felt like I needed to prove I could paint, which if I think in hindsight, I probably would have done a different route. At any rate, in conjunction with the move to Mallorca, I decided it was time to, plus I had met some goals that I had wanted to reach, and I met those. And so in conjunction with moving to Mallorca, I decided it was time to let go of that and do what I really, want to be doing, which was abstract work. And in my journey of teaching myself to paint, I explored many mediums, and one of them that I fell in love with was called Encaustic. It's thousands of years old. The first examples are from 37 AD, and it's basically hot wax. It's a beeswax mixed with damar resin, and pigment is added to it. I personally buy it already pigmented. And so it doesn't dry, it cools, and as a result, you can immediately build upon layers without having to wait, unlike, for instance, oil paint. Acrylic is similar, but it doesn't have the body. So there's a lot of advantages to the medium, and I just fell in love with it. It is expensive, and it has to be on wood substrate, which is also expensive. So
you have to do wood.
You have to do it on wood, otherwise it'd be like batik, and the wax would crack on the fabric.
Yeah, of course.
And so it's also a bit cumbersome because you need heating to melt the wax in your studio and whatnot. So I think those are some of the reasons why a lot of artists don't choose to work with it. But to me, all of that is worth it because I find what you get in return is just
Well, I'm in love with
Yeah.
your work. You know that from the moment I went to your studio. And even actually, I was very drawn because we didn't meet in Italy.
Correct.
We did an article about you for one of the Slow magazines. And when I saw the photos, I just thought, wow, I love this work. And I think one of what really calls me is this special, it's like the sheen, the finish of the wax and how it plays with the light. And it just, from various times in the day, even how the light falls on the painting creates such a difference. And I find, I also notice with your work, you have some that it's much more intense. So the colors are much more vibrant. Sometimes it's darker. And then sometimes it can be these beautiful, very harmonious tones, which is, you know, I was reading today the article again, and it really struck me this idea of calming yet engaging. I think that's kind of quite captures
and it's a
your
hard
work.
balance to mix. And sometimes within that balance, I go, more for the engaging, if something's a little bit bolder and louder, and sometimes I'll go more for the calming.
Oh, there's sometimes as well, I love this, there's kind of this message, you give a name to your painting, that there's something that's in your head when you're creating that. And
yeah, well, that's a whole nother subject. But,
right.
And I do believe, I don't know if you're aware of, there was a Japanese doctor that was doing work with water, and he would, label the water, and then they would analyze the molecular structure of the water. And, the molecular structure of the water when it was imbued with love was very different than, playing rock music, for instance, or saying hate, using the word hate. In other words, water is believed now, there's been much more work done, that water has a living intelligence. And in many ways, I feel wax is a little bit like that plasma. It has, I do, because when people come into my studio, I've had people say, I don't want to leave. And I'm just so blown away. I mean, it's busy, they're tourists, but they just get hit with this overall sort of vibe. And so it's always nice to relate to people in that way.
So it's beautiful. I'm lucky enough to have one of your paintings, which I'm very grateful for. And I think it does radiate this kind of, this calmness, this welcoming also feeling in your home, which is maybe in today's world what we all need a little bit more of.
Absolutely.
To surround ourselves with something that we love, but also that kind of radiates this beautiful harmonious energy.
Yeah, it's certainly important to me.
Yeah, beautiful.
I think that's a gift that, a gift and a service that we can offer.
Yes. So one of the ways, let's say, that you offer for people who would love to know more about your work, you actually open your studio. So you're a working artist in your studio, displaying your work, and then people drift in, right?
Yeah, pretty much. There are some people that, most of my patrons have it's happenstance.
So they happen to find themselves in Fornalutx, they climb those beautiful steps, and then they're walking into your studio.
Yeah. And then if there's an interest, I love to engage, There's always an interest in the actual medium itself, because so many people have not heard of it. And then, conversations will go deeper if it's about what's behind the work.
But you've had since you opened your studio, it's growing, right?
I've had an amazing response. Last summer I shipped all over Europe. A couple to North America. And I've been really, in 20 years of painting, I've done the best I've ever done from a business perspective.
Wow,
that's incredible. So that's really encouraging. Yeah. And so, I don't think we got to the question there, or at least the answer about other artists. It's really hard to say what works for other artists. I feel blessed that that the direction I want to go does fill a current niche in the art world. But I can't say that about everyone's work.
No, I think each person, they're on their own journey.
Exactly.
But what I love about your story is that, you did take that brave step to go with your heart. and pack up your life, move here, and start really from the beginning. And also with your work, because it was kind of honoring the work you did for 20 years in another lifetime, and said, I start from scratch.
I start from scratch, which is hard because I had,
really
6 galleries at the time with the old work. And
your work was so different from what it is
absolutely,
now.
it's
And very successful in its own right.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, but how difficult when something is working and you have patrons and people are excited to buy your work. It's hard to say, okay, now that's done, I'm going to do something new.
Correct.
The tendency might be to just stick at what you're doing because you're afraid.
But it's so important to embrace change. And I mean, I think we get really stale if we don't. I find change very invigorating. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean I seek it out. I think there's a time to reap and sow. So, I guess some people wouldn't have made that move. That's not me.
Great.
Someone posted something about oh, it's going to kill me to something about following dreams, and I said, well, it'll kill you not to follow your dreams. So
of course, you got to follow your dreams.
Yeah.
So on the business side of your studio, what's been your experience with
So on the business side, I've had to go autonomo, which is I'm in the system now, which is new for me, as a taxpayer. So I'm in the system, and I pay a fee to be able to work, basically, to be able to be an independent
Well, it's like your
work.
Social security kind of payment.
Yeah, well, it's slightly different because in Canada, for instance, it's a percentage. Here, it's an upfront cost that you have to pay no matter whether you make money or not.
Exactly.
So that, and they make it easy at the beginning because it's, 75 euros or something. But, that goes up rapidly. Personally, I'm not fond of the system because I think it punishes entrepreneurship. And I think a percentages makes much more sense. So I'm not
I totally
keen on it.
agree with you on this point.
So, but it is what it is, and that's what one has to do. And, we're all used to doing things we don't want to when it comes to bureaucracy. So that's one of them. So I just basically signed up for, my autonomo and opened up my doors.
The only thing I would say about it, it is flexible. So, for example, if your season is more from, let's say, April to October, you can actually just pay for those months that you want to invoice your clients.
Correct.
But then if there's other months where you don't, which probably I don't know in your case, but it could be more seasonal because of the location of your studio.
Yes, I've just learned
there is
that.
a little bit of flexibility in that sense, but it's good to know those things. How we have kind of met and bonded and grown our relationship is through the business network, and it was really great to see you participate in some of our business lunches.
That's my big day out in Palma.
So how has that experience been for you to meet other business
Really
people?
invaluable. Really invaluable. I am still talking, networking, dealing with people I've met through because of those experiences.
Brilliant.
So I'm currently discussing, an art show in Old Town Palma with someone I've met through your functions that would, do a collaboration with that. I'm offering to donate, art to an auction with someone I met also through. So there's been a lot of...
And some friendships also along the way.
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
people who you've been
Absolutely.
So that's the one thing. I think it's sometimes it's something that's maybe undervalued a little bit when you're doing business here, that you're so focused on your own business, setting it up, doing what you need to do. But having support, and especially because it can be kind of a lonely journey here, right? If you're doing something that you don't have a whole big
I wouldn't
team
know
around.
because I joined.
No, but yes, good. But I mean, prior to that, it could feel quite isolated here trying to do your business.
For sure.
And you know, I think just even if collaborations and customers don't actually fall from the business community in its own right, it's just the inspiration, the you know,
it's not
the
community. It's the difference
Mm.
between working in a studio on the stairs overlooking the plaza and working on your own in a basement somewhere in a you know, warehouse. You know, it's the, you know, connection.
Yeah.
I mean, so yes, absolutely. The connection, and the connections I've had have been really lovely. And I personally never felt I went in with the intention to do business.
Yeah.
For me, it was more of a social network.
Mm.
And finding like-minded people that are sort of in the same sort of genre, time in life, you know, type of building years. So, and I found that. So I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and one of the things I love how cosmopolitan it is, for a great mix of different communities, different ages, because, you know, I love that we have sort of 25, 30-year-olds coming as well that are at the beginning of their journey, and they can look to people like you for a bit more experience and getting some insights that maybe they're...
Well, I don't know about that. Those youngins are pretty clever these days.
They are. But, you know, experience counts for a lot too.
Yeah.
Isn't it true?
Well, but up until this point, I don't feel like I have a lot of experience yet on the island. It's just growing.
Yes, and that's the other thing that we do within our community. There's people that have been on the island for many, many years. And of course, it's good always to ask for a record. I mean, I think life sort of revolves here for foreigners anyway, through getting referrals. Oh, who do you go to for your tax return? Who do you go for this? Who do you go for that? And we get recommendations, right? And then when you've heard it 2 or 3 times, the same name coming up, then you say, okay, I'm gonna go with the. It's how we operate here.
For sure.
So, is there any piece of advice that you would like to share with perhaps those who are thinking of making a move to Mallorca, and you could give them just something that maybe you say, I wish I'd known that?
For me, I don't know if it's so much I wish I'd known that. Well, I guess the one thing I wish I had known is that the Mallorcans are lovely people. It just was by luck that I was sort of open and respectful and generous and kind. But I think if you come in here with your guns blazing, it's not appreciated. And so I think I didn't actually know that. But I've seen foreign villagers, not be met with open arms because of attitudes that just didn't work with the culture here.
They always say Mallorca can either suck you in, embrace you, or spit you out. Yeah. And it is sometimes the energy here, it doesn't match with some people.
Correct.
And those that it does match, it's kind of embraced and welcomed.
Correct. And so in that vein, the advice would be to come in open and basically open
and respectful
and humble. And not a faux humble, real humble, like open and humble. And I mean, just curious, and to not assume. I think the assumptions, like even today, I had an incident where we're on a group chat in the village, and I just wanted to some things were being said, and I just didn't want to assume, right? I think it's really important not to assume that you know how anybody else feels. Particularly the locals. And one of the reasons I say that is because, I think there is a degree of frustration with the foreigners coming in, to be honest. And I think when it comes down to an individual, that never comes through, but as a whole, which is similar to Vancouver. I mean, the Asians came in, and again, as a whole, it wasn't that it was an Asian,
collectively,
it was just a group. Any group coming into any sort of new area, it's not always met with open arms, and I think we need to be sensitive to that.
Absolutely. And I totally agree, having lived here many years and seeing many people come in and
different groups
thinking that they know it better, they are going to bring something that, we're going to teach you something. And it's very arrogant, kind of
Yes.
very. And I think we really, when we come here to live in a place like Mallorca, we've got to be so respectful of the culture, the heritage, the nature, the people, and where they come from.
And that comes also when it doesn't suit you. You know, for instance, with my house and the renovations I would have liked to have done, which is what I'm saying. These are all beautiful lessons to look within.
Yeah. Beautiful that you see it like that. So I have a few quick fire questions.
Okay, let's
Here
see.
we go. Are you a beach or mountain girl?
Oh, I would say if I had to choose mountains, but that's a first. It's only because I've lived in Hawaii for 8 years.
Okay. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise.
Okay. Summer heat or winter calm?
I think winter.
Winter, yes. Siesta or fiesta?
Ooh, that's a tough one. These are tough ones.
Okay.
Lately it's been siesta, but I can equally do fiesta.
Oh, you can. Pamboli or ensamada?
Pamboli.
Pamboli. And north coast of Mallorca or south coast of Mallorca?
North.
You're north, yeah, me too. Brilliant. Well, Julie, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Hazel, for your patience.
She has just been amazing. You're four-legged new addition to the family. It's just been incredible. Such a good girl. How old is she?
Just 5 months now.
Oh, wow. And now you don't leave her at home. She's coming
No, she kind of tucks in my pocket everywhere.
Great. Well, Julie, thank you.
Yeah, and Helen, thank you, obviously.
And I suppose I'd love to, and I'm sure you shared this, kind of an open invitation, to people who would like to know more about your work, to pop into your studio.
Find me online.
If you're not there, give you a call or send you a message on Instagram, and you're happy. I mean, I've actually put you together with some newcomers on the island because I think you have a lot to share, and it's great.
Good.
So thank you so much for
welcome.
being here, and
welcome,
look
Helen.
forward to continue the journey with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into today's episode of Mallorca Living. We hope you found it inspiring and uplifting. If you're planning to relocate to Mallorca and buy a property here on the island, we would love to guide you and support you in your journey. Reach out to us today, book a consultation, and let's start your journey together to move to Mallorca.